Hello, I'm Mr. Matthews, and this is a response video to Megadan's recent video where he showed off all the games that he had in his childhood NES collection. So I'm going to do the same with mine. Now, I don't have nearly as many games to show off as he did, mainly because I really only had an opportunity to get a new game maybe twice a year, which was obviously a birthday or Christmas, and once in a blue moon, I might get lucky enough to get a third game that year. But for the most part, my system of choice at the time was the Game Boy, so I would mainly request games for that system, and the NES was more of a kind of an afterthought. So without further ado, let's just go through all the games I had. All right, so I'm gonna cheat a little bit on this one because it is Mario Brothers, but this isn't the copy I had. Of course, I had Mario Duck Hunt. That's the one that came with the NES. That's the one that I think most people had. I don't have that game. I don't have any need for it, mainly because I have Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt both separately. Now, this next game is the first game I specifically requested, mainly because I was in love with the arcade game, and that was Donkey Kong Classics. Now, Donkey Kong Jr. was the game that I played as a kid. That was the first arcade game I played. I loved the game, and I definitely wanted it on the NES. Now, at the time, I did not know that Donkey Kong Jr. was available separately as a black box game. I only knew about this one. And as it happens, this is my original childhood copy. Somehow I've managed to hold on to this over for like 35 years, and that's multiple moves across the country, so amazingly, it's still in my collection. Now, these next two should come as a surprise to no one. Mega Man 2, Mega Man 3. Obviously, I loved Mega Man as a kid. I love Mega Man now. But these are the only two games I owned. Like I said, I was mainly invested in the Game Boy. So it was the Game Boy Mega Man games that I mainly focused on. But I still had these, played them all the time, loved them. Compare this to the Yellow Devil in Mega Man 1. Like, there's the way he just kind of explodes onto the screen here. Mega Man 1. Wished it could be this cool. There are some things about this game that I have not been able to come to peace with, and that's what keeps me from putting this game in the upper echelon of Mega Man titles. I can't deny that there's some absolutely fantastic music in this game. All right, this next one is Super Mario Bros. 2. Now, again, this is my original childhood copy that I've managed to somehow keep in my possession. I loved this game, and to this day, this is one of my favorite Mario games, probably more than Mario 3. I didn't see anything weird at all about the fact that it was so different from the original Mario Brothers, and I still play it annually to this day. All right, so I have another little story about this one, Rygar. Now, let me tell you about my dad real quick. If you ask my dad today how he feels about video games, depending on what mood he's in, he might tell you that video games are a waste of time and kids should be outside playing and not rotting their brains in front of the TV. Now, I'm sorry, Dad, I gotta do this to you, but I've been watching you for the past 40 some odd years, and I know that you like video games much more than you let on. For example, my first video game system, the Atari 2600, was handed down to me by my dad. So he actually at one point had a Atari and a bunch of games, and he himself was the ambassador that introduced me to video games and showed me about how awesome they were. And he has continued to hand down to me his old video game stuff over the years. I have many of his PlayStation games, as well as his Nintendo Wii, and all of his Wii games that he bought for himself. And he also bought me this game. So I don't know how it was, but I was away for a day, probably at a friend's house, and when I came home, I'd found that he had rented a game for himself, which was Rygar, of course. He thought it was awesome, I thought it was awesome, and of course, the next birthday or Christmas, I of course received it. Now to this day, this is one of my favorite NES games of all time. I consider this kind of a precursor to the God of War series, and in fact, I wasn't surprised at all to see that they actually hacked Rygar when they were making the NES version of God of War. It's essentially the same formula based loosely around Greek mythology. You have a large overworld map, and you're constantly journeying from one end of the map to the other to collect weapons and powers and items to help you on your quest. And of course, you have a boomerang style weapon that honestly plays quite a bit like the Blades of Chaos from God of War. Amazing game. Now, I'm not sure exactly how I came to own this next game, but it's Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest. So one of two things probably happened here. I might have requested a different game, maybe the original Castlevania, and they either couldn't find it or didn't see the difference. I got this one instead. Or, which is just as likely, my dad might have seen the cover, thought it looked pretty awesome, which it does, and got it for me then. It doesn't matter. I had the game. I played it quite a bit. I didn't really see anything wrong with it at the time. I never really did get too far in the game without Nintendo Power's help. But I did beat it as a kid, and I always kind of liked it, and I still like it to this day. I was quite surprised to find, years later, that it is considered a bad game, which it is not. It's just a little bit flawed. Now, this was the last game that I received as a kid, before I moved on to the Sega Genesis. This was Tom and Jerry. Now, I grew up with the cartoon, always loved Tom and Jerry, so when I saw they had a game coming out, I knew that I had to have it. Now, this was developed by Software Creations. They were the ones who developed Incredible Crash Test Dummies and Solstice and Silver Surfer. So if you are familiar with any of their games, you kind of know what to expect. Really good graphics and animation, really good music, and only so-so gameplay. All right, I'm again going to cheat a little bit on this one. It's Little Mermaid. Now, this game wasn't actually mine. When I got a Sega Genesis, my sister inherited my NES, and she started getting really girly games for herself, and this is one of them. I probably played this game more than she did. Listen, it's a Capcom game, so you know it's probably not crap. In fact, it's actually really good. The only flaw that I say it has is that it's a touch on the easy side, because remember, it is a girls' game, and back then, developers assumed that girls couldn't play hard games. Very easy, but still pretty darn good. So even though that wasn't technically my game, I still kind of consider it one of my childhood NES games. Probably more so than my sister does, to be honest. All right, so this was my childhood NES Collection. But let's keep this going. I would love to see more videos from people in the community talking about their video game collection, NES or otherwise. Megadan didn't really stipulate that it had to be for the NES. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Mr. Matthews. Goodbye.